Hello, I'm Carolyn Kinane, Associate Director at the University of Virginia Contemplative Sciences Center, and this is the fourth in a series of brief videos about contemplative course design. So if you have not yet had a chance to look at the first three, I invite you to please go check out those on the contemplative pause in course design, the contemplative pause in teaching and learning moments. So in this part, we're going to move into specific student activities and assignments that draw from contemplative values and processes. So if you are already familiar with the community of inquiry framework, you may already have been thinking about developing some activities to increase students' social presence. If you're not familiar with the community of inquiry framework and you will be teaching online, please take some time to go do a quick bit of research about that. So, community of inquiry framework, ideas for building social presence, many of those kinds of activities can also tend to the inner world of students and can invite the whole self, the self beyond the academic, into the learning space. Such activities can also demonstrate care and can also cultivate awareness. So, for example, if you're a contemplative educator, you may already be doing some of these things. You could start class with a moment of silence to give folks a chance to check in with where they're at, to transition from one activity into the next one, and to then have a one-word check-in. Just go through and say one word, what you're bringing to our time together. I say a word, stress, and I pass it. Bill, how are you doing today? And Bill's thinking about dogs. So Bill says dogs and passes it to Charlotte. So those, a moment of silence to arrive, a one-word check-in, that helps students to notice they're here and not there, coming into a shared space and time. It also gives the instructor a sense of the room. It helps students not just to feel seen, but to be seen. Hey, I'm here, I've got stuff, I'm entering into our space together with some of this stuff. And it's also a chance for students to follow up with each other if they wish. It offers people a kind of social in. Hey, you said you were stressed at the start of class today. What's going on? People can reach out to one another and follow up on a personal connection. Related to that is an exercise I call check your bags. I come into spaces and I've got my baggage with me. And if you also have some baggage with you, let's check our baggage at the door, either through some private writing, through drawing, through speaking into something. A way to acknowledge that folks may have stuff on their mind, and it might be helpful to shine a light on that stuff, bring awareness to what they're bringing into the space together, perhaps set an intention for the next 50 minutes or 75 minutes or 10 minutes that they have with their classmates, and then return back to the class with a sense of presence. So another activity for social presence is contemplative listening, which in addition to social presence, builds empathy and can inform action in the world. And before I talk about contemplative listening, I do want to tend for a moment to action. A common critique of the mindfulness movement is that it is focused on the self and on meditating away worries and reducing stress without doing anything about it. As I hope I've already made clear, from my perspective, the purpose of contemplation is transformation. Transformation of habitual ways of knowing, being, and doing. Transformation that shows up in the world. The affective realm and attentions to states of mind or consciousness, the ability to willingly adopt and choose disposition, these elements impact behavior. Focusing on the affective dimension of learning is also a crucial element, and here I'm reading from the slide, in developing critical thinking. Bassion and others identified that critical thinking has two dimensions, cognitive skills and affective dispositions, such as, quote, honesty in facing one's own biases, prejudices, stereotypes, and egocentric or sociocentric tendencies, trust in the processes of reasoned inquiry, open-mindedness, and open-mindedness concerning divergent worldviews, end quote. These ideas focus on the potential factor for higher education to be transformative and not merely vocational. Marzo defines transformative learning as, quote, learning that transforms problematic frames of reference, sets of fixed assumptions and expectations, habits of mind, meaning, perspectives, mindsets, to make them more inclusive, discriminating, open, reflective, and emotionally able to change. Contemplative pedagogy recognizes the powerful role of affective states, dispositions, and habits of mind for ethical action. I find it difficult to fact someone into changing their mind. Course content alone is not enough for transformation, which is why at CSC we focus on offering students experiences, exercises, and practices that bring attention to their assumptions and habits, invite inquiry, provide space for reflection, and so on. So while a first step to action might be bringing awareness to habitual ways of being, a next step might be building students and my own capacity for empathetic engagement. I'm reading from the slide again. One of the things that was important to me is that students do more than just learn about different philosophies, but explore their own attitudes to the environment from both affective, contemplative, and relational perspectives. I was inspired by Arthur Zion's idea of an epistemology of love rather than an epistemology of separation. Zion argues that our modern epistemological emphases on objectification predisposes us to an instrumental and manipulative way of being in the world, also characterized by disidentification with others, resulting in a loss of empathy and a sense of disconnection from other humans and the environment. He calls for an intentional cultivation of more empathetic relationships with these others and sees contemplative practice as an important part of this project. This has implications for affecting more concern for justice in our communities. Studies have shown that empathetic concern is positively correlated with pro-social behavior and justice motivation. So one practice to encourage empathetic engagement is deep listening. You can find many variations of this practice on our website and elsewhere online, also called mindful listening, active listening, and it goes by a variety of names. So this is one version of the exercise where I might invite students to write for a moment what's something mildly annoying that happened in the past 48 hours, not anything too major, just a small annoyance you're willing to share. And then after they write for a bit on that, what is something that has brought you joy in the past 48 hours? Not anything too major, again, perhaps just a simple delight that you're willing to share. Then students are placed in dyads, and partner one speaks for 3 minutes. I use a bell or some other way of indicating that the 3 minutes are up, while the partner listens. The listener can do any kind of body language or nodding, but the listener is encouraged not to speak and maybe to avoid too much active listening, the way we might traditionally think of that, which could influence the speaker in what they choose to talk about and how they choose to talk. So the listener wants to be as passive as possible. There's a 30-second pause, and then they swap roles. Then the partners have a chance to debrief before rejoining the group. The questions that they talk about could be tailored to your course content. They could be tailored to current events. The content can change depending on what your learning objectives are. I kind of like this one because it also gives me the opportunity to talk about the negativity bias. Frequently, I find that folks find it pretty easy to think of something mildly annoying that happened in the past 48 hours, but people need a little bit more reflection time to think of something that brought a little bit of joy in the past 48 hours. So this exercise can help people to see that they listen in particular ways. So this can bring awareness to habitual ways of listening. What is it I'm usually doing when I'm listening? And also, if framed in such a way, can help me practice humility and curiosity as a listener. So I've noticed students have a variety of responses to this exercise. It often surfaces the idea that students listen with all kinds of unexamined intentions. They listen to fix, to problem solve, or to sound smart, or connect and be likable. So in the debrief, students will often say, oh, I wanted to interrupt, or I wanted to connect with this person. I wanted to explain something that they didn't know. I wanted to solve their problem. Some folks say that they find it really relaxing as a listener, that suddenly they're released from that obligation of having to fix or perform or connect, that passivity in listening and that open spaciousness they provide to the speaker is actually a bit healing for them. It also helps the listener practice not knowing. Rather than asking leading questions, the listener listens for perhaps genuine questions. So this exercise can be framed so that students are helping someone come into their own wisdom, or framed so that students come to see the world a little bit as another might see it. This is just one way to build empathy that encourages ethical action in the wider world. And I look forward to hearing your comments and getting some of your ideas about the ways that you develop contemplative activities and assignments. In the next section, we will do some exercises for instructors that include helping folks to develop their own activities and assignments informed by contemplative processes. So I hope you take us up on the offer of doing that exercise and developing activities and assignments that are appropriate to your own context and your learning goals. Thanks again so much for your time.